Bison Media Zone on WDAY Extra.
And welcome everybody to this week's edition of the Bison Media Zone. We do it each and every Wednesday at 10:30 with the Forum's Jeff Kolpak. I'm Dom Izzo. Final regular season home game for the Bison is already here. Jeffrey, Missouri State, swan song for the Bears as they get ready for FBS football. We'll get to them in a moment. I had Brett McMurphy on the show this morning. This news broke a week ago. He reported that the Bison were in consideration for the Mountain West. He said no news, nothing new. No news may mean good news on that front. What did you take of what he had to say?
Well, I think certainly no news would be good news, Don, because I think when you take an FBS, a program that's already been maybe established and looking to move from one conference to another, much easier than to convince the powers that be to move an FCS up to FBS or to accept an FCS program. I think there's one in play right now, and like your guy said, he doesn't know if there's any other FBS out there that would be a good candidate. So what does that mean? Where does it leave you? So I think he's right, and that's my gut feeling is with no news is maybe okay.
I would tell you this, if this drags on to the spring, I don't think any of us are going to be okay. The resolution would be nicer on this, but that's not how this works. We've seen this happen with both, this is a college presidential decision. It's not even an AD decision, but I have to imagine that they have their facts about what North Dakota State is and what, or maybe that's what they've been gathering for the last little bit about what they could bring to the table.
Well, and I think it goes both ways too. I have to imagine that NDSU has approached the necessary people in the Mountain West on, who needs to know about this university? Who needs to know about it's a top 100 research facility? All those academic things. I mean, this is not some junior college here. The NDSU has been established. It's a land-grant university. It would enter a conference that is full of land-grant universities. That means they're like-minded.
That's a great point. Yeah,
Joe Chapman would like to say when the Bison were moving up to Division I, he goes, this university needs to be with like-minded other schools. And I think the presidents still value. You'd think they would. I'm not convinced of anything of a certain.
We know
anymore.
Geography means nothing anymore.
Yeah.
That is out the window. But I think for schools like Wyoming, they certainly know about North Dakota State. Now the other ones, I'm not sure how much they do know. The fact that you've always hit on this, there's an airport right by the stadium that if the presidents were to come and see it, that would be, it's just in and out. You know what I mean? Like they're right here.
Well, I think Air Force obviously knows about North Dakota State.
Being
just
wrestling.
through wrestling.
Yep, you're right.
I mean, you have that component, and these other schools, they can't be that ignorant, can they?
Well, never say never on that. I was at 60-40 last week after that interview with Kolpak. I think I'm at 70-30 now that this happens.
Wow, you're getting that.
I think so. After hearing what Brett had to say, I think I'm pushing more towards, I think this is more yes than no.
Are we confident of his sources, though?
I would be, yes.
Okay.
I would be. Of what kind of reporter he is, yes, I would think. The one thing, and to your point, no one else has reported on it. That was interesting to me. I know Mike wrote about this on Monday, that normally this is the vultures get in after somebody drops a nugget like this, and no one else has, which is intriguing.
Well, it's
different.
Okay, then I would take that as somewhat of a negative.
Maybe.
Because maybe they've done some some backstory researching and say, well, maybe it's not really. Because you're not going to write a story to say that he's wrong.
Correct.
You know, you're not going to go, okay, no, Brett McMurphy is not right. NDSU is not. Let him die with this story.
Be fascinated to see. And the interesting part is, we asked Tim Polisic yesterday at the press conference, and do we believe that none of his players came up and asked him? I don't know. The players we did talk to, seemingly some were more. And granted, none of these guys are going to be here for a potential move, but all seem to be in favor of seeing NDSU at an FBS level.
And I think they were good-natured about it. I mean, they're worried about Missouri State as they should be, and they were just answering the question as sort of a obligatory. Yeah, that would be cool later on. And I could see why the university would want to do this, but I mean, to me. Looking at their body language, it's not like they were, we need to do this now. It was more of a, just sort of a half-hearted,
cursory answer
cool.
on that.
Right.
Yeah. All right, well, let's chat about the football game because there is a big one. The Bison hosting Missouri State, each team at 6-0. You wrote about it this morning at Inforum.com on Cam Miller's decision to stay. The larger picture, none of the seniors decided to go when Tim Polisic was hired. after Matt Entz left to go to USC. I think now, as we almost a full year later on this, Jeff, it is remarkable in this day and age that this many guys decided to come back in the era of the portal where anybody could have left, that nobody decided to do that.
Yeah, and I think you got to credit that in a couple areas. Number one, the players. Obviously, they like each other and want to stick around. And Cam Miller had opportunities. Make no mistake, there were other schools looking at him. And now we see why as he's put together his senior year. And number two, the Green and the Gold Collective.
Yes.
I mean, that has been around now. It's somewhat established. It's growing, and it's my belief that it's growing at a pretty decent rate. So that is a factor. Now, they're not paying players Ohio State money. They're not paying hundreds of thousands and new cars. And what I saw at the University of Colorado, all these Teslas, new cars coming out of the parking lot.
They ain't doing that.
They're not that level.
No.
But it's something combined with the Alston payments, combined with cost of attendance. I mean, these players for FCS and potentially group of 5 schools, I think are going to be okay in competing with other schools like that. You're not going to stop the guy, again, going to a Big Ten school well, they did, though, actually. I mean,
they did with Gray Zabel. They absolutely did. And Cole Wisniewski, which brings up an interesting point as you see Zabel here. The Cole Wisniewski and Raja Nelson's names are not on that list, and that's a conversation that Polisic said when I asked him. He wanted to have an answer by tonight about whether basically are either of these guys coming back for 2025. I guess we're going to know sooner than later, Jeffrey, if they're going to use that extra year of eligibility that each of them have.
And even if they are announced before the game,
doesn't mean they can't come
back. It really
back.
doesn't mean that, that discussion can't be altered or whatever. I just think Tim, for this week, wanted to know, okay, are you in or are you out?
Right.
And then let's be done with it.
I think Raja's going to come back. Wisniewski, and then after the conversation that Polisic had with us a couple weeks ago, Wisniewski is not going to play this week. But he said sooner than later, he's going to get on the football field. So the question then is he available next week for the showdown in Vermillion against the Coyotes?
Boy, it's intriguing, huh? What a story. I just and arguably your best defensive player. Well, he is your best defensive player.
You take the argument out of that.
The FCS leader last year in interceptions, and a guy at 6'4" and pretty smart kid too on the back end, especially after losing Sam Young, who was a smart kid on the back end. So if you could somehow get him, and it depends on what kind of a level he'll be at though too.
Yeah, even if he's 75%, you take Cole Wisniewski back at that level. Knowing how the safeties have played, I'm really intrigued to see what happens this week. We'll get to Mo State in a second. I think, however, if he's available to you and Cole's ready to go, you get him back out there.
Yeah, and the doctors give the okay, and Jim Kramer gives the okay. I think it's okay.
All right, Missouri State. I have Mo State pegged in the preseason. I think I told you 3 wins, 4 wins. Like that, this is not going to be great. Well, they have been maybe the most surprising team of all of FCS and the most quiet team in FCS because they're moving to Conference USA next year. Their quarterback is Jacob Clark. He's a huge guy, 6'5", originally from Texas. Started his college football, Jeff, at the University of Minnesota. They might want that guy now. I know Brosmer's been okay. But this guy is huge. He can throw the football, and this is going to be a challenge for the Bison defense.
He's got NFL prospect size, certainly at 6'5". And what the throws I've seen, it looks like he can make most of the throws, strong arm. He's transferred. He missed most of the last season, played 4 games, got hurt.
Yeah, got hurt right before the Bison played him last year.
And so, obviously, I like his poise in the pocket, as we just saw right there. Guys in his own end zone stood in there and waited for his receiver to break open down the middle. And that, to me, is a pretty top-level quarterback. Now, they haven't really played anybody, though. I'll say that.
That's exactly how I was going with this.
So we'll see what the difference in the schedule is on Saturday. So they haven't really, obviously, played a defense, I think, of NDSU's caliber. I mean, look at that guy. There's nobody in the back end after that catch.
That's the intriguing part. Let me just run through this real quick on what Mo State's schedule has been this season, because I think you bring up a good point on this, and we talked about it earlier on when they were ripping off wins. They lost to Montana to start the season, probably a game they should have won. Their FBS game, I think they certainly should have won. They lost at Ball State by 8. They beat Lindenwood, who just beat SEMO. They beat UT Martin. They're a playoff team, I think, out of the Ohio Valley. They beat Youngstown by 7. They routed Illinois State, which the Bison did as well. Beat Indiana State, Northern Iowa, SIU, and then Murray. And then the game this past Saturday, they gave up 31 to Murray.
Yeah,
is that alarming to you?
Well, NDSU is certainly going to test their run defense because they gave up 150 yards rushing to Murray a team that, what did NDSU give up? Not much.
No.
We never saw Racer 1 go around
No,
the
we
field
did
because
not.
they didn't score. So
They scored 4 touchdowns against Missouri State. I'll look at Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa's anemic offensively. They scored 42 against Missouri State. If I'm the Bison offensively, and they have not been stopped by anybody this year, you got to feel pretty good about moving the football on Saturday.
And I think it starts with Marty Brown, who
Yeah.
I think's
Yep.
the Jerry Rice top front runner. I think he's going to get the ball a lot early.
Yes.
And test him. I think you're going to look at the Bison offensive line. They have Griffin Empey back for
Yep.
the first time after missing 2 games. He's a starting left guard. So that's a positive. And just coming off a bye in general, I think is a good sign.
One injury note before we go to break. Jalen Duffy, starting corner, will likely not play in this game after he suffered a finger injury against Northern Iowa. So he's doubtful. Likely Anthony Shadimi Alfaro will start again opposite Marcus Shepard in the secondary, which they're going to get tested, Jeff. I think this is a high-scoring game. What do you think?
Well, obviously it's going to set. Well, we'll see what Missouri State does against the Bison defense.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, but I'm not going to pick my score yet
I know.
because I don't want to tip you off.
I think there's going to be some points scored. Let me
Yes.
just say that at the Dome on
pretty safe
Saturday.
assumption.
We come back. We'll chat. It is signing day for the other sports, including basketball. I'll give you the download on that and look at the spotlight games of the FCS this weekend. Back on the Bison Media Zone here on WDAY Extra right after this. Welcome back, everybody, here on the Bison Media Zone. I think we got Separation Saturday coming up this weekend. What do you think?
I haven't heard that.
Yeah,
term in a while.
I'm waiting on it because the games we got coming up, the game obviously in Fargo being one, and there's a couple other ones that are going to catch our attention, namely the one Saturday night, top right corner there, Montana State and UC Davis after what the Aggies did in Missoula, Jeffrey. Now they get the Bobcats, and Montana State is a dynamite football team. This is a heck of a game Saturday night.
I watched the Davis game, and they are impressive.
Yeah.
And that's their best team, and I think in the FCS.
I would
era.
agree with that. Yep.
And they're at home, and that Davis is traditionally a good football town. I'm curious to see how they'll pack that stadium. They should.
Boy, that's the Big Sky Championship game in essential. That whoever wins that will have the automatic bid and win the conference championship. And I'd say probably the 2 seed. If the Bison win out, whoever wins that game is going to be the 2 seed in the FCS playoffs.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, Montana State, Davis head to head, they'd have equal loss,
Yep.
I think, in that department. And I think we're generally considering that Montana State's going to handle Montana at
Yes,
home, too.
I would think so. That game's in Bozeman, the Brawl of the Wild, next week. The newbie game in the bottom right, Abilene Christian and Tarleton State, 2 of the newcomers to FCS. Each of them are highly ranked. That's a big game in the United Athletic Conference there. I'm intrigued to see. Each of these teams has a chance to be a top 8 seed come next Sunday.
Well, I'm not really looking forward to that one. I mean, it's just, it's these teams that we just really don't know. We haven't seen much.
I'll say this, they can score. I don't know how much defense they play, but they got a ton of talented players, both the schools in Texas.
Well, they are both pretty good in Division II.
Yep.
So
The game up in Grand Forks, South Dakota, obviously we'll see them next week in Vermillion against UND. And I'll say this, it's not over for the Fighting Hawks. If they are able to win their last 2 games, Jeff, they'll have wins over South Dakota and Illinois State at 7-5. With the win over Montana, that'd probably be enough to get them in.
I question, though, their confidence
Yeah,
level right
you're right.
now. It's got to take a hit. I just don't. I mean, they're trending the wrong way at
It's
the
not
wrong
going
time
well
of the
right now.
year.
No.
I watched that South Dakota State game. Just handled them
Yes.
after the Hawks scored early. I just don't like the way, even at home now.
Yeah. Yep.
There's question marks.
South Dakota State scored with 38 unanswered points after the Fighting Hawks scored the first touchdown of that game. Defensively, that's the thing where UND could always hang its hat on. That has not been the case, certainly this losing streak where they gave up 40-some out of Youngstown. They gave up 30-some out of Indiana State, and obviously what the Jacks did last week.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess you could still put that out. But it's just something just doesn't seem right right now.
The game here on Saturday, now Mo State, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. This is their Super Bowl the next 2 weeks. The FCS playoffs they're ineligible for. They have the Bison here and then the Jackrabbits next week in Springfield. I have to imagine Ryan Beard's going to put all the chips in. Like, we're going to see trick plays, everything, right?
Oh, there's no question. I watched the Ryan Beard press conference that was held, his weekly press conference this week. Oh, this guy is fired up, man. He's ready to go. It's just, you could see in his voice, you could hear in his voice, you could see in his eyes that this team, I mean, it's all now. It's down to 2 weeks. That's their season.
Yep.
There's no playoffs, and he is yeah, he is all jacked up. So I'm sure his players will be ready to go. And the end of the season with NDSU and South Dakota State.
Yeah.
And for a program that was just so irrelevant for so many years, how cool would it be for them to end their FCS tenure with wins over the number 1 and 2 teams in the country?
Yeah, that would be, you want to mark it down for things I never saw coming.
Yeah.
That I would take for 100 there on that. I am intrigued, though, as we look forward for them moving on. They're going to Conference USA. They've had this kind of year. Does that portend that they can be good in FBS football?
I talked to the athletic director, Patrick Ransdell, earlier this week, and he came from Appalachian State, which made the transition,
Yep.
and he's a fundraiser at Appalachian State. So, boy, those are 2 good qualities to take to Missouri
no doubt
State.
about
Now,
that.
I asked him, when Joe Chapman came here from to be the NDSU president, he saw a sleeping giant in Fargo. So I asked Patrick, I go, do you see Springfield in that area as a possible sleeping giant? I've always felt that way.
Yes.
I know you have.
Yep.
Every time we've
Yep.
gone there, it's like, why isn't this
They
program
should be better. Yep, they should
I mean,
be.
it's a nice area. It's pretty good population, 500,000 in that whole area. Nice school.
Location to Chicago and St. Louis, you're right there.
Well, he obviously agreed. And
Yeah.
He goes, well, that's our job. But they're going to try to raise around $50 million for their operations area.
Real quick before we wrap, Mark Farley announced over the weekend that he's going to retire. Panthers are 2-8. It's not good right now. How appealing is that job looking ahead now in your
Not
mind?
really. I don't. I mean, you're last in the Valley in budget according to the Knight Commission.
Yep.
It's not a great job right now. I don't think you pay your assistants very much. It's but there is money. We've been told there is money in the Cedar Valley, and so maybe somebody new can inject new blood. But yeah, Mark Farley, nice run, but it's time.
I don't know. I don't think anybody on staff. The amount of
Bryce
turnover
Paul?
there, maybe,
Yeah.
but
I think you gotta bring somebody
I think
new
they
in.
go external. I
Yeah,
do.
I
I think
think
they
you
go
have to.
so with some connection to Northern Iowa would be nice, but I don't think it's anybody on his staff that gets that job.
I agree. I think you got to just find a new avenue
Yeah.
and do something different.
Last thing before we wrap, it is National Signing Day for all sports except football. Bison basketball has been busy. Riley Massey will sign with the Bison men. That's official. 6'3" guard out of St. Louis. Looks like Dave's only going to probably add one. Jory Collins added 3 players today. Sophie Hawkinson, guard from Wayzata, Minnesota. You'll see her here. Carrington Asp, 6'2" forward out of Dubuque. And then McKenna Johnson, also 6'2", out of Mandan, North Dakota. This is a highly touted, these 3 players here that this is the kind of player that Jory Collins was looking for. All of them come from big AAU programs.
You need that to match South Dakota State, and that's your job right now at NDSU is you got to try to match South Dakota State and somehow beat them every once in a while.
Yep.
As far as the men, I did a story on this last spring on signing maybe one. You know who the Bluesers are in this? Are the high school
You're
seniors.
exactly right.
Who
Yep.
used to be NDSU used to be 3 or 4 a
Yep.
year. Now it's going to be 1 or 2.
Yep.
And that's across the board.
Yeah, it's not just,
So these players are probably going to have to go to D2 or JC and try to find a way to move up that way. But that's the transfer portal. That's one of the problems with it is you're not going to take a kid who you think might be pretty good.
Correct.
Maybe 2-3 years down the line. Those days are over.
Yep. And it's not going anywhere either. The Bison are going to add probably 3 or 4 players in the spring, depending on who's back with their roster. That's just the name of the game. Jory Collins has a press conference later today. You'll hear from him. That'll be part of our newscast coming up later tonight at 6 o'clock. Don't forget, we're back with you for Bison Game Day on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. with Jeff, myself, Sam, and Kyle. Get you ready for Missouri State and North Dakota State. There could be some fireworks. We'll also be with you earlier than that. We'll be on at 2:10. We'll bring you the entire Senior Day celebration. There's 23 guys, could be up to 27. So it's going to take a little bit. We'll have the full coverage of that coming up on Saturday afternoon prior to the Bears and the Bison.
And then they got to get ready to play a game, Dom. I mean,
There
no
is a
more
fo-
pomp and circumstance.
There is a football game coming up. We'll have coverage of that, of course, on WDAY. Final regular season home game, and then it's off to South Dakota for the regular season finale against the Coyotes. For Jeff Kolpak, I'm Dom Izzo. Thanks so much for watching the Bison Media Zone. We'll see everybody back here next Wednesday.